Friends, would you join me for a moment of prayer? Gracious God, may these words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be found faithful in your sight. For you, God, and you alone are our rock, our strength, and our Redeemer. Amen. Well, as you might have seen on the news, on April 1st, the Artemis II rocket launched from Kennedy Space Center in Florida on a 10-day mission to the moon. It came back on the 11th, and in many ways, this was a historic space flight. I don't know if you knew this, I didn't until just a few days ago, that the Artemis II crew, there were 4 people on it, and on that crew was the first person of color to go to the moon, the first non-U.S. citizen to go to the moon, a guy from Canada, the first woman to go to the moon, and the oldest person ever to go to the moon. They also set the human record for the farthest distance traveled from Earth, traveling 252,000 miles as they circled around the dark side of the moon. And as if that wasn't enough, this was the first time in 54 years that humans have left low Earth orbit and we've returned to the moon. And along with this return to the moon, I think, has been a return of imagination of what can be possible in this next era of human discovery. The Artemis II mission, maybe you've heard, was a test flight. And all they wanted to do was go around the moon and test out the spacecraft and the procedures because they're preparing for future missions. And the Artemis II program, the goal is to not only land on the moon, but to establish permanent human bases on the moon. Isn't that amazing? That's like right out of a science fiction book, but it's real, it's happening. But of course, this isn't the end goal, because what they want to do is not only land on the moon, but learn how to do it so then we can go to Mars. This is the ultimate goal. Because Mars, as many scientists believe, is our best chance for permanent and sustainable human habitation outside of our Earth. Isn't that amazing? We're headed to Mars. But this raises a question, does it not? Amongst all this excitement, all this science, all this what's possible, why are we trying to find a backup planet? Could it be that this is just the next phase of our human development and we've explored all the corners of the Earth, so now we're exploring space, possibly? Or could it be that we are aware that our planet is dying, and so we're beginning to look for a plan B? I don't think this is the intention of NASA, but it might be indicative of a human disposition. Maybe we're ready to give up on the Earth. Friends, this morning I want to encourage and challenge us. We cannot give up on our Earth. And not only because it's the only home that we've ever known, but because, as the psalmist says, the earth is the Lord's and all that is in it. And God has not given up on this earth, nor should we. Our relationship with the earth, friends, it is a fundamental feature of our spirituality. And if you go back to the very beginning of the Bible, Genesis chapter 1, you see one of the first things it talks about is establishing who we are, who God is, what is the earth, and how are we meant to live in relationship to it. It's likely you have read Genesis 1, and if you have, you know the pattern, right? God speaks, and God creates something, and then God looks at it and calls it good. And every day, there's 6 days of creation. God creates, God looks, God calls it good. And on the 6th day of creation, God gets around to making humans. And God creates, God looks, says, yeah, they're good. But then something happens on the 6th day of creation that doesn't happen on any of the other days. God creates and then tells the creation what to do. Because if you notice, in about verse 26, God creates humans and then says, "Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it." And God says, these humans are made in my image and in my likeness. No other part of creation is made in the image or the likeness of God. And this is a wonderful gift, that somehow within our humanity we bear the likeness of Creator God. Now that's a whole nother sermon to explain what that is, but there's a gift that humans have been given. And with that gift comes a role, a responsibility. And in the text it says to subdue and have dominion over the earth, which sometimes we have interpreted as we can do whatever we want with it. But I would suggest a better interpretation of that role and responsibility is to be a steward of the creation. To be responsible to it and responsible for it. As the ones who bear the image of God, we are God's representatives on earth and in creation. And as those who represent God, we're invited to remember the earth is the Lord's, not ours. And our role and responsibility is to represent God's presence on earth. To take care of what's not ours, but what's been given to us, like a steward or a trustee. I want to suggest that this is not just a job or an assignment. This is a vocation. Now, vocation is a word I don't think we use very much these days, and when we do, it's often related to vocational school, which is like specific training for a specific job. But in a spiritual sense, vocation refers to more than a job, more than a career, more than a responsibility, but your purpose, your calling, your mission in life. Vocation is, who are you made to be, and how do you live into that? And I want to suggest that God has given us as human beings the vocation of caring for this earth. Our life's mission, our purpose, our created design is to be faithful stewards of what's not ours, but what we are entrusted to take care of as those who bear the image of God. Creation is more than the earth, all the stars, all the planets, but the earth is ours. The earth is that little slice of creation that God has given to us to take care of. But in so many ways, we have abdicated and neglected this vocation. We have abused our power and control over the earth for our own ends, and as a result, let me just say it and leave it here, the earth is suffering. And I'm fully aware that this has become a point of political contention in recent years. But let me just suggest for us today that talking about creation care is not primarily a political issue. It's a theological and spiritual issue first and foremost, because it asks the question, how are we in relationship with the earth? And if we consider our vocation, our purpose, our calling in life to be trustees of the earth, it's worth asking ourselves, are we living up to our responsibility? Just a few days ago, we had a trustees meeting at the church, and we have a great trustees team. They do a great job and a faithful job to take care of our building. But consider for a moment if the trustees of our church, or the trustees of any organization that you care about, use that organization's resources as a means to only satisfy their desires. Consider for a moment, would you keep those people on the board of trustees? I hope the answer would be no. Paul, I'm sorry, you'd be off the board. But here's the thing, friends. When we neglect our vocation as trustees of the earth, it's not only the earth that suffers, we suffer too. See, we've been duped to think that the fullest and best life is the life of unlimited consumerism. I got to be careful because this will get political real quick. But we've been convinced the fullest life is one where we always need more and more and more to satisfy our hunger. And in this model, our relationship to the earth is we see the earth as something to produce things for us to consume. But the Christian tradition has always taught that the life of unending consumerism is not what we were created for. We were created for so much more. We were created in the image of a creator God, whom all things were made, and given this responsibility to tend on behalf of God to the earth. And what that tells us is that when we live in that right relationship, when we live in honor to that vocation, that's the pathway to life, and life in its fullest sense. So the invitation for us today, the invitation that is always available, is simply put, to remember who we are. Remember who you were created to be, and remember that your fundamental calling and purpose in life is to not be a consumer, but a steward of the wonderful gifts God has given to us. Now, in closing, I want to talk just briefly, because some might say that we should not forget that this earth is not our real home, that our real home is up there in heaven. And I appreciate that. And I also appreciate the fact that science tells us our earth probably won't live forever. Did you know this? The best of our science tells us that in a few billion years, when our beloved sun begins to die, it's going to expand. And the best we know is that one day the sun will expand so much it will actually consume the earth. And then this, we could say, well, if our real home is in heaven, and if earth is already on the way out, we don't have to take care of this mess because we're going up. Or maybe if we're going to the moon, and then we're going to Mars, maybe we don't have to take care of this home, because our hope is in that place up in the sky somewhere, whether it's heaven, whether it's the moon, whether it's earth. But the end of the Bible tells us something different, because we began at the very beginning and we're going to end at the very end. Revelation 21, we see this vision of a new heaven and a new earth. And did you hear the direction that happens? We do not go up to a new heaven and a new earth. God comes down. New heaven and a new earth. See, we tend to think that salvation is leaving earth and going up. But God says salvation is about God coming down to renew, to restore, and to make all things new. So why does any of this matter? I mean, if the earth's going to die, why does it matter if we recycle? Well, it matters, friends, first and foremost, I want to suggest, because in the beginning we see, like we've said, we are made to take care of this earth. And when we live into that vision, we find renewal, we find life in the fullest sense. And it also matters because in the end, God does not give up on creation, but plans to redeem and restore it. And if God does not give up or forsake this earth, neither shall we. Perhaps then every act of sustainability, every act of recycling, every act of living into that vocation that's core to who we are is a vote. As James Clear would say in his book Atomic Habits, a vote for the kind of person you want to be. And I would add to that, a vote for the kind of person you were made to be. And a vote for the renewal of the earth. Every act, an act of faith and hope that God is not done with us yet, and so we're not done either. Amen? Amen. Amen. May it be so.